Hi, my name is Amir Zmora, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of FlexiWAN. This presentation is about the open source SD-WAN of FlexiWAN. And I want to start actually and talk about the SD-WAN market and the solutions that we see out there. So SD-WAN market is a crowded market, as we all know, both from vendor perspective and services perspective. We see between 60 to 70 vendors out there. And we see that almost every service provider is providing SD-WAN services today. Those who do not are working on providing it. And many of them are actually using multiple vendors in order to provide their services. Now, when we look at the solutions that are offered today on the market, they have a few things in common. They're typically closed solutions, and they also typically try to bundle hardware and software, although you do have some options of running it on the VM, but still the idea is to create a single vendor type of solution that locks in the customer, service provider, or enterprise for a long-term contract and doesn't allow multiple vendors into the solution. Of course, you have VNFs, but that's a different type of way of offering multiple vendors. It's not part of the SD-WAN itself, it's external. The way to do that, and what we see, is actually bundling of many technologies and capabilities into one big software stack. And you can see technologies here like WAN optimization and DPI and firewall. And these capabilities, they can come from many companies. They don't necessarily need to come from the SD-WAN vendor. But what we see in reality is that these solutions are closed solutions. They come with a big lock on them. You can't really remove things. You can't replace and put, let's say, a different WAN optimization technology inside the solution. You need to take it as it is, and you cannot change anything. Now, the flip side, or the other side, when you look at this, is the enterprise requirements. And the enterprise requirements are actually completely different because they vary and they can be anywhere between centrally managed IPsec tunnels. These are actually how do you connect the network, define the network architecture, connect those encrypted tunnels between the various locations in various architectures, manage them from one central location, and all the other elements that you want to add on top as the basic foundation of networking, all the way to the closed and big solutions that we saw before. The reality is that the enterprise requirements are always somewhere in between these two extreme cases, but they're never at the same location, same side, same place. And more than that, sometimes you see that in a single enterprise, you would see different requirements. Retail is a great example. You have the large offices that actually require a lot of features, or you have the stores that want very cheap hardware, very cheap software, and they don't need all the bells and whistles. Solutions today have a hard time answering this type of requirement. Now, to make things even worse for the service providers, SD-WAN, similar to voice over IP, is provided as an over-the-top service, meaning you can go and buy connectivity from any service provider, any telco, and then go and buy the SD-WAN from the vendor, from an SI. You don't need to necessarily buy it from the service provider. And that's why for service providers, the ability to actually differentiate, impact, and not simply resell a solution that they're getting from a vendor is critical. And when we talk with service providers, they all say that their threat with SD-WAN is to become pipes and resellers, similar to what happened to them with messaging and voice over IP. Now, this is where FlexiWAN open source comes to play. And before I talk a little bit about the open source, I want to talk about open source in general, the evolution, I would say, of open source solutions. And the beginning of open source was of unaffiliated communities that decided to create a revolution and develop something. I think that Linux is a great example of that. You don't necessarily have to have a business model behind it. It's not a company that is initiating this. It can be some people in the garage and more people joining the community and coming out with something great. The next generation already has a business model behind it and comes from companies. And these can be solutions that would be available as open source. You can take them, compile them, use them, Or you can go to the company and say, hey, you know what? I want a commercial license because I want to do something that is not covered by the license. Or maybe I want support, or maybe I want a hardened package of this open source. And we see here examples like Red Hat, or other examples of very big companies that develop various elements that are components, technology components like databases or media engines, codecs, things like that. And they use them inside their product. So they have a completely different way of making money, but they provide the open source as something that the community can actually take and build and find bugs, test it, and improve it. The third generation is companies that focus completely on the development of that open source, and then they offer it either as an open source that you can take it, compile it, use it on your own, or they offer it also as a SaaS service, and then you can take it and use it offered by them. This is actually what FlexiWAN is doing. And if you look at the sources of this, these three generations, I didn't invent this. It's actually from an article by Mike Volpe, who was a venture partner at Index, and before that, Chief Strategy Officer for Cisco. And this is on TechCrunch. This is the link. I highly recommend reading it. I think it's a great article. So with focusing now on SD-WAN and FlexiWAN and the open source of FlexiWAN, so we disrupt and democratize the SD-WAN market with what we call the 3 world firsts of FlexiWAN. First of all, this is the first and only open source of SD-WAN. Second, this is the first and only application store. And I'll talk about this in the next slides a bit more. And it's the first SaaS business model. Open source, if you saw what I said before, the 3rd generation offered as a SaaS model. This is exactly what this open source, the way it's offered in the commercial way. We'll talk about it further as well. So what we actually do is we slice SD-WAN to horizontal layers, where you have the base layer, which is the networking infrastructure. The networking infrastructure are those centrally managed IPsec tunnels, routing protocols, zero-touch provisioning, all of these things as a foundation. On top of that, we have the application framework. And this is what allows you, through an SDK, to dynamically load third-party applications that run in the edge, in the virtual router, or in the management. These are not VNFs. They run inside the data flow. You can run bare metal and still load these applications. And by this, you can move anywhere along this line of enterprise requirements dynamically. And the solution doesn't need to come from us. It can come from other vendors that would integrate into the SD-WAN offering. So with this, we see ourselves as the Android for routers. I always show this phone here, okay? Because when I purchased this phone, the company, the vendor of this phone, decided what features are inside. And we're saying that networking is today still in the feature phone world. And this approach, this vision, is taking it through the revolution of the smartphones. And that's why we call it Android for routers. So talking a bit more now about the business model. So one option is to go ahead, take FlexiWAN's open source, and just compile it, use it. Everything is included inside. The open source includes the edge device, the management system, everything is there. There are only 2 elements that are not included in the open source that you can just take and use for free. One is our billing engine, because that's part of our SaaS offering. And second is the UI layer. All the management logic is inside. It has REST APIs, which you can see on our documentation. Go to our website and resources to see it. And you can use these APIs in order to build your own UI. So these are the only 2 elements that are not included in the open source. Now, if you say, well, open source is great, but I also want support, I want it hosted, whatever. For that, we also have a commercial business model. And this is the next slide. So basically, we're offering 3 options for hosting the management system, what we call FlexiManage. First is what we call a shared environment. This means, and I'll show you a link to that in just a minute, also to the open source. It means you can go to our website, create a free account, and you install up to 3 devices for free. You want more than that, you put in a credit card and you continue working, and no commitment. You can stop it any time you want. You pay month by month, and that's it. You don't need to commit to anything. And it's, of course, a multi-tenant system. The second option is what we call a dedicated environment. In this case, what we do is we spin up a complete set of servers for you, 2 clusters of databases and all the servers and everything, dedicated only for you in a white label option, where you can put your logo and everything, and you have much more control of many things like the software upgrade schedule. You can test it before in a test environment and all of that. And also here, no long-term commitment. You can stop at any time you want. The third option is very similar to the common open source commercial license option, meaning we give you the complete package of the software, but instead of you taking it and compiling it from the open source and using it for free without support from us and anything, you can take this package in a compiled way. We will help you install it, we will train you and so forth and support you along the process. And in this case, we do want some kind of a small commitment because it's a lot of work for us to work with you on putting this all together. Of course, it could be with high availability and everything. So I want to share with you 2 links here. First of all, if you want to take a look at the code, the open source, easiest way to get to it is go to our website, to this link. You'll see on the top menu the open source item, and there you'll see several options to do. You can join the community, or you can click on a button there to get the link to the open source itself, and then you can download it and do whatever you want as long as you comply with the license, which is AGPL. Second thing that I'm showing here is a link to the hosted management, because before you start working hard on compiling and so forth, you can have a very, very easy way to kick the tires, and that's just to go, it's on our pricing page, but what you see there at the top, actually, the most dominant thing is a link to open a free account. You click on that, you open a free account on our hosted management system, that's the shared environment, and you can run there 3 instances for free, kick the tires. If you like it, continue to more, either on a commercial option or an open source free option, whatever you want. That's basically it. I think time now for questions. I'll be happy to take some questions if you have. Thank you. So I'm looking here through the Q&A to see if anybody has questions. We just have a few more minutes. I don't see any questions so far. Okay. Well, what I can say is that I invite you to head over to those 2 links that I showed before. You can download the software and check out the source itself, and also open just a free account if you want to do it very easily. Then you just very simply install the Edge device, play around with it, and then you can also take a look at the source code. So I don't see any questions so far, so I think that we'll just